Have you ever felt like you're sleepwalking through life? Like you're on autopilot, reacting to everything around you without really choosing your own path? That moment where you realize how much your life isn't truly yours can be unsettling, but it's also where the real journey begins. Today, we're diving into the teachings of two fascinating figures who tackled this very problem, G.I. Gurdjieff and Rudolf Steiner. I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Transcendent, my platform from a perspective formed from a journey around the world through life, crossing the spectrum of human experience from high to low as most people in American society define them. This channel is all about inspiring common people to find their power and place their uniqueness in their lives. Much of the research and understandings I've come upon in my journey involve biblical scripture as well as that of scientists, mystics, philosophers, and exceptional spiritual leaders, pioneers in psychology and neuroscience. Much of their work is complicated and technical. I'm an engineer, and I'm deeply connected to my emotions and inner life, so I've conducted research in my life and I'm sharing it here, hoping to ease the way for others who also deal with complex PTSD or have a calling to pursue their uniqueness or have a friend or loved one in such a place. Some of my work feels original here, but those who I've studied, like Jung and Gurdjieff, Nicole, or Steiner, or the Apostle Paul, deserve much of the credit. Transcendent is intended to help people recover from tough turns in life. It's not a belief system or intended to create a following, but a deliberate platform to present a wide range of experiences which help me adapt to severe shocks and losses in my life. Gurdjieff and Steiner were two influential thinkers from the early 20th century who had some pretty radical ideas about self-discovery and human potential. They both agreed on one big thing. Most of us are basically asleep, even as we think we're awake. But they had very different approaches to waking people up. Let's start with Gurdjieff. He was this enigmatic guy from Armenia who had a knack for shaking people out of their comfort zones. Gurdjieff believed that if we're all living in a state of waking sleep, what does that mean? Well, he thought most of the time we're just reacting to things around us without any real awareness or intention. We think we're making choices, but we're really just running on autopilot. Gurdjieff came up with something called the fourth way. He saw that there were three traditional paths to spiritual growth: the way of the monk, which is focused on devotion; the way of the yogi, which is focused on knowledge; and the way of the fakir, which is focusing on the body. But Gurdjieff thought these were all incomplete. So his fourth way was meant for regular people living ordinary lives. The idea was to work on all aspects of yourself, body, mind, and emotions, while going about your daily business. One of Gurdjieff's big ideas was that we don't really have a single unified self. Instead, he said we're made up of many different I's or subpersonalities. Think about it. Have you ever promised yourself you'd start a diet only to find yourself reaching for a cookie an hour later? Gurdjieff would say that's because of the health conscious I that made the promise, but the comfort eating I that took over later. We're full of these conflicting parts, and most of the time we don't even notice them fighting for control. So how did Gurdjieff propose we wake up from this sleep? Well, he had a few key practices. First, there's self-observation. That means really paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and actions through the day. It's about catching yourself in those automatic behaviors, like checking your phone the moment you feel bored and starting to question them. Then there's what Gurdjieff called conscious labor and intentional suffering. This sounds heavy, but it's actually pretty practical. The idea is to use the challenges and irritations of everyday life as opportunities for growth. That annoying coworker, that traffic jam that made you late, instead of just getting frustrated, you try to use these situations to practice patience, self-control, gain insight, or whatever quality that you're working on. Gurdjieff also talked about balancing three centers in ourselves: the intellectual center, which is the thinking, the emotional center, the feeling, the moving center, which is the physical sensations and instincts. He believed most of us are out of balance, relying too much on one center and neglecting the others. So if you're always in your head overthinking everything, Gurdjieff might have you do some intense physical work to reconnect with your body. One of Gurdjieff's ultimate goals was something he called self-remembering. This is a state where you're fully present in the moment, both aware of yourself and your surroundings. It's like both participating in life and observing it at the same time. It's a challenging state to achieve, but Gurdjieff saw it as a key to breaking out of our mechanical patterns. Now let's switch gears. Talk about Rudolf Steiner. Steiner was an Austrian philosopher and scientist who took a very different approach to human development. While Gurdjieff was all about shaking things up, Steiner was more interested in creating a systematic understanding of spirituality and human growth. Steiner developed something called anthroposophy. I have trouble saying it. Anthroposophy, which he described as a spiritual science. He believed that as we study the physical world scientifically, we can also study the spiritual world in a rigorous, systematic way. Steiner saw humans as having three main parts: the physical body, the soul, which includes our emotions and desires, and the spirit, which he saw as our eternal, individual essence. Steiner mapped out stages of spiritual development. He talked about imagination, inspiration, and intuition as progressive levels of spiritual perception. Imagination, in Steiner's view, wasn't just daydreaming. It was a way of perceiving small spiritual realities through mental images. Inspiration was about receiving spiritual insights, almost like hearing the voice of the spiritual world. And intuition was the highest level, where you could directly experience spiritual truths. One big difference between Steiner and Gurdjieff was their view on reincarnation. Steiner believed strongly in it, seeing human development as something that happens across many lifetimes. He thought our current life was shaped by our past lives, karma, and that our choices now would affect our future incarnations. Steiner's ideas had a huge impact on education. He founded the Waldorf school system, which is still popular today. Waldorf schools focus on nurturing the whole child, not just the intellect, but their creativity, emotional development, and physical skills too. In early grades, there's a big emphasis on imagination and storytelling. Kids might learn math through knitting or science through gardening. The idea is to engage all aspects of the child's being in the learning process. Steiner also developed some unique practices. There's eurythmy, a form of art that tries to make speech and music visible through gestures. He came up with biodynamic farming, which goes beyond organic farming to incorporate ideas about cosmic rhythms and forces in nature. And he created various meditation exercises designed to develop spiritual perception. So we've got two very different approaches to waking up and developing in our human potential. Gurdjieff's way is intense, often confrontational. It's about shocking people out of their habitual patterns and making them face uncomfortable truths about themselves. Steiner's approach is more gentle and systematic. It's about gradually developing new capabilities and aligning oneself with spiritual realities. Both of these thinkers had their critics, of course. Gurdjieff has been accused of being manipulative and cult-like. Some of his methods, like intentionally putting students in stressful situations, can seem harsh. Steiner's ideas, especially about race and evolution, have been called pseudoscientific. And some of his practices, like burying cow horns filled with manure to energize the soil, can seem pretty out there if you're coming from a mainstream scientific perspective. But despite the controversies, both Gurdjieff and Steiner have had a lasting impact. You can see echoes of Gurdjieff's ideas in modern mindfulness practices and some forms of psychotherapy. The emphasis on being present and observing your own thoughts and behaviors is now pretty mainstream. Steiner's influence is most obvious in education, with Waldorf schools all over the world. But his ideas about holistic development and connection between humans and nature have influenced fields from agriculture to medicine. So what can we take away from these two thinkers? I think the most important thing is the wake-up call. Both Gurdjieff and Steiner, in their own ways, are challenging us to question our assumptions about ourselves and the world. They're asking us to look beyond the surface of things and to take an active role in our own development. Gurdjieff's approach reminds us to be vigilant about our own patterns and reactions. It encourages us to use the challenges of everyday life as opportunities for growth. Steiner's vision encourages us to see ourselves as part of a larger spiritual reality and to develop all aspects of our being, not just our intellect, but our creativity, our emotions, our connection with the natural world. Whether you learn more towards Gurdjieff's intense self-observation or Steiner's systematic spiritual development, the key is to start paying attention. Notice your habitual reactions, question your assumptions, look for deeper meanings in your experiences, and most importantly, take an active role in your own growth and development. Remember, waking up isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, a daily choice to be more conscious, more intentional in how we live our lives. It's not always easy. In fact, both Gurdjieff and Steiner would say that real growth often involves discomfort and challenge, but they'd also say that it's worth it, that there's a richness and a depth to life that we miss when we're sleepwalking through our days. So I encourage you to take some time to reflect on your own life. Where are you? Where are you on autopilot? What patterns or reactions do you notice in yourself? What aspects of yourself might you be neglecting? And most importantly, what small steps can you take today to be more fully awake, more present, more fully yourself? Remember, the goal isn't perfection. It's not about becoming some idealized version of yourself. It's about showing up fully and authentically to the messy, beautiful process of being human. It's about engaging with life in a way that's more conscious, more intentional, and ultimately more fulfilling. Whether you resonate more with Gurdjieff's intense wake-up calls or Steiner's holistic vision, the important thing is to start where you are. Take that first step towards greater awareness. Be curious about yourself and the world around you, and trust that even small changes in how you approach your life can lead to profound transformations over time. As we wrap up, I want to encourage you to keep exploring. The ideas we've discussed today are just a tip of the iceberg, and when it comes to human potential and self-discovery, there's so much more to learn, so many different approaches to try. Keep questioning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep waking up to the fullness of who you are and what life has to offer. I'm Mark Roach, wishing you all the best.